And yes, now my focus for this lecture would be NGT and its role in environment protection. Now, to begin with, let's talk about that why and why there is a need for, or why there was a need felt in India that we should have a specific tribunal, and what is the objective of having tribunals. Now, we all are aware that we have got remedies under specific environmental legislation, and when I talk about the era where these specific environmental legislation were not passed,
Ma'am, we are not able to hear you. Can you please check up the mic?
Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Uh, Earlier, I was audible or not, Abhishek?
No, ma'am. You are not audible. Can you please start it all over again, if you don't mind?
No, I can start it, but somehow I have clicked on to the mic. How it? Oh, I'm so sorry. I just,
No
I
problem,
just,
ma'am. No.
I just check it out. Just a minute. Somehow, maybe it has started recording, and right. I'll just start it all over again. I had discussed much of the things in regard to the introductory. I'll start it
My
all over.
apologies, ma'am. Thank you,
You
ma'am.
could have. I thought the things are going at your end. I'm so sorry. Okay,
Ma'am,
I'll start it again.
thank you, ma'am.
Just a minute. Yes, Abhishek. I'm starting all over again.
Yes, ma'am. You're audible, ma'am. Please start.
Yes, I'm so sorry. It did not. I was not aware. So, I had started with that. What? How environmental jurisprudence grew in India. Now, I was talking about that when you look on to the remedies available in the country, it is primarily the two major categories of remedies we are looking at. One is your civil remedies and the other is your criminal remedies. When I look on to the civil remedies, it is your articles given under the constitution, and majorly when I talk about the recognition of rights, it is article 21. Apart from that, when we come across other civil remedies, it is section 91 of the CPC, and then civil remedies that are available under the law of torts. So these are the civil remedies available, and when I look on to the side of criminal remedies, it is primarily your IPC, public nuisance, and under section 133 of CRPC, removal of public nuisance. So these are the broad two categories. And when I was looking forward to seek remedies, if I talk about constitution law, it was your, if I talk about the Supreme Court under Article 32, and then if I talk about High Court, it was Article 226, right? And for all other civil remedies, it was the, I mean, the lower courts, and then went into appeal and then to the Supreme Court. This was the structure like. And similarly, on the criminal side, when I look at, if it was removal of public nuisance, then in the magistrate court, and the complaint was filed, and then remedy was seen. Then I talked about primarily the remedies that were available. If I talk about the civil law, it was injunctions and compensation for damages. And this was the kind of structure going on. Now, when I talk about recognition of rights in regard to environment, India being a country where issues in regard to other things, for poverty removal, for infrastructure development, for industrialization, for so if you look on to the challenges of a developing nation, they're much more than looking forward towards your environment. So there's nothing wrong in it. Being a developing nation, there are certain challenges which every nation faces. So when I'm talking about these challenges, somewhere your right to a healthy environment was lagging behind. Then it was the decade of 1970 where India was participated in the Stockholm Convention, where we could see that in the Stockholm Convention, India participated, and then the this was this it was this decade that we could see that in India we had started talking about environment. And then in the very next decade, it was the two major accidents that took place in India dealing with hazardous substances. One was the Bhopal gas tragedy leakage, and immediately an year after the oleum gas leakage in Delhi in Shriram Food and Fertilizers Limited. So these two accidents also played a very, very instrumental role in paving way for environmental jurisprudence, growth of the environmental jurisprudence. And then we could see that there were vigilant citizens of this country who stood, who came forward, and they started with the initiation of PILs, right? Primarily, if you look on to the development, you could see that PILs were filed, and then we could realize and appreciate that the Supreme Court proactively came forward and recognized that right to live in healthy environment is a fundamental right under Article 21. Although when you plainly read Article 21, you'll not reach to a conclusion that it is talking about environment. But when we look on to giving a true meaning to right to life, then we understand that yes, right to live in healthy environment is our fundamental right recognized under Article 21. So with this, we could see that yes, people, social spirited people had started coming up, taking up various national issues which cut across borders and which primarily focused on the improvement and protection of the environment. Now, coming on to the process that was being taken, we could see that the judgments were coming, there was redressals, reliefs were granted, but somehow these reliefs were delayed. And by the time a judgment came, a lot of harm was caused to the environment. Now, this, if you look at, is it 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 is a gives a mark of a futile exercise that if you have caused so much harm to the environment, waiting for that a new or sorry, I mean, waiting for the time that the judgment will come, by that time, a lot of harm is done to the environment. And restoring the things are much more difficult, and if we prevent the harm, that is much more, I mean, it's much better than restoration. So that is why a need was being felt to have a dedicated tribunal. So when I talk about the workings of tribunals, these are quasi judicial mechanism which focuses on a specific issue. So we have got debt recovery tribunals, right? We've got other tribunals which are specific. We have got labor courts, we have got uh, consumer courts. These are dedicated, subject oriented forums where we usually think and feel that yes, these fast track courts provides a platform where there is quick and speedy disposal of the cases, and the remedies are given at a much quicker pace than the traditional courts. So NGT is also one of those tribunals. Now, when I talk about NGT, the Stockholm and the Rio de Janeiro, these are the two important uh, conventions when we look at. And if you look onto the preamble of the National Green Tribunal of 2010, you could very well appreciate that in its opening paragraphs, it has clearly made a mention that the Stockholm Convention of June 1972, which is the United Nations Conference on Human Environment, and the other one is the Rio de Janeiro that took place in June 1992. This is United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. Now, these two conferences and conventions, India participated in it, and it had taken an initiation that for the protection of environment at the domestic level, India would be taking several steps. Now, this is that entity is one of those initiations. Apart from this, as I've just told you, that when I look on to Article 21, right to live in healthy environment has been duly recognized in several cases, MC Mehta cases, then Vardishan case, you could find that it has been duly recognized that right to live in healthy environment is the fundamental right in under Article 21. So this also supported that when we are talking about right to live in healthy environment, it is important that our environment should be protected and least harm should be caused to it. So that is why looking on to the basic reasons, we could see that the NGT came into being. Now, apart from this, if you just talk about the origin and development, it was the 186th report of the Law Commission of India, which came in 2003, which talked about the proposal to constitute environmental codes. And with this, the NGT came into force on 18th October 2010 with the passing off of the act. One more uh, fact that I would like to share, that the National Green Tribunal Act of 2010, which was passed in India, is India became the third country in the world after New Zealand and Australia, which had the special fast track courts and the quasi judicial bodies that deal with the environment related issues. Now, with this act that was passed in 2010, the earlier two acts, that is the National Environment Tribunal Act of 1995 and the National Environment Appellate Authority Act of 1997, stands repealed, and the NGT was the Uniform Act that was passed, and it was duly implemented along with the rules that came an year after in the country. Yes, now I'm changing on to the next slide. Now, let's talk about a few important objectives of the entity. Now, as I was just talking about your expeditious disposal. Now, in this slide, I have mentioned about to provide effective and expeditious disposal. Now, both these words have got a very specific meaning. Effective. Now, how do you judge the efficacy of a judgment or an order? For making any judgment effective, it is important that the panel should be equipped. Now, when I look onto the composition of National Green Tribunal, it is unique in its sense that it is having a composition of not just judicial members, but it talks about expert members. Now, when I talk about these expert members, these are panel of individuals who are expert in the field of, maybe they deal with pollution issues, they deal with issues of industrial growth, they deal with issues which are directly related to pollutions and pollutant, and also how the level of pollution can be brought down. So when you look onto the kind of composition that is given under Section 4 of the National Green Tribunal Act, you would get to know that apart from judicial members, it is talking about expert members. Now, these expert members in the panel give their valuable suggestions while disposal of the cases, which makes the judgments and orders passed by the entity very effective and
Ma'am, sorry to
expeditious.
interrupt, but the PPT is not visible to us.
Okay, okay. I just check it out. Otherwise, it was my
Yes, ma'am.
screen. I'm sharing the screen. It is there. There's some issue. I don't know why, but now is it visible, sir?
No, ma'am. Ma'am, it's okay. You can continue without the PPT.
I just check it once. Why it is not? Uh, sir, now,
Yes,
sir.
ma'am. Now it's visible.
Okay, and I'm audible as well.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You're audible as well.
Okay, should I just show you the last slide as well, or should I continue with this?
Ma'am, you can continue with this slide.
Okay, okay. So I was talking about that. This is how the orders passed by the NGT are very effective and workable, which I'll be discussing in the end by discussing 2, 3 landmark judgments given by the NGT. And then expeditious, yes, because a dedicated tribunal that deals with the cases related to environment would certainly be a better platform and speedy disposal of cases we've seen that has been done by the entity. Now, giving reliefs and compensation for damages to persons and property. Now, this is also an important objective, because when I talk about reliefs and compensation, and when I'm just uh, talking about that this is a civil remedy that are provided on the civil side. So the damages in terms of compensation that are given, this is, and when you talk about expeditious reliefs that are given, it makes all the more, or it's add all the more importance to the entity. Now, its main aim is to legally enforce all rights relating to the environment. That I've already told you, that this is a dedicated tribunal which deals with the issues related to environment. And last, it talks about, it accounts for providing compensation and justice to affected people in any damages. So this is the kind of uh, objectives that are involved, and national green tribunals, they look on to multidisciplinary issues relating to environment. This is a unique feature in it, that it deals with multidisciplinary issues related to environment, and many important judgments you could appreciate that yes, the NGT has played a very vital role in paving way for environmental jurisprudence in the country. Now, when you look on to, I am not dealing with the definition part. The important definitions given in regard to environment. So it says environment includes water, air, and land, and the interrelationship which exists among and between water, air, land, and human beings, other living creatures, plants, organisms, and property. So, this is the kind of how environment has been defined. And if you look on to the definition part of environment, it is not just restricted to air, water, and land. It is also talked about human beings. It is also talked about other living beings. And it is also talked about very important thing. It is property. So it is dealing with both the aspects of living and non-living thing as well. And when you talk about the major issue that we usually face, which causes hindrance in environment protection, is the kind of concrete jungle that is coming up. And because of that, you could see that the many species and our environment is put at stake. So now coming on to the next important aspect of our the topic for the today. The next is your establishment of tribunal. So section 3 primarily deals with it. It primarily says that the tribunal is being established and it would be known as the National Green Tribunal to exercise its jurisdiction, powers, and authority conferred on such tribunal. Now coming on to the composition of tribunal. It says a full-time chairperson, not less than 10, but subject to a maximum of 20 full-time judicial members as the central government may from time to time notify. And third, it says not less than 10, but subject to a maximum of 20 full-time experts. Just a second. Yes, experts as the central government may from time to time notify. Now, this is the act saying, but while discussing this with you, I would like to bring to your notice that the composition that is being of the entity currently, this is much below than what is projected in the act. So the entity is working with lesser number of members. Now, if you look on to the basic composition, one chairman, and if I talk about the least, then it is 10 judicial members, and then it is talk about the 10 expert members. But we usually see that the entity is working with, in comparison to what has been given under the act, with lesser number of members. And it is that is why it is seen that this is sometimes being criticized as well, that we are not having a proper strength of members in the system of the and composition. Sometimes it is even criticized that it is weak and criticized on various platforms. And time again, it is also been said that the composition should be improved. It should be in accordance with the provisions given under the act. And so that is how we find we face certain challenges that and which we need to overcome in future. Now coming on to the benches and the principles and the zones. Now, when I talk about the National Green Tribunals, it has divided the country into 5 major zones. So when I talk about the 5 major zones, these are the 5 major zones that are existing in the under the National Green Tribunal Act, With northern zone, we are having its principal, its northern zone, its seat is in Delhi, and the seat in Delhi is set to be the principal bench as well. So this is in Delhi. The next bench, when we talk about the western bench, this is it is having its seat in Pune. Then the central bench, it is having its seat in Bhopal. The southern bench, it is having its seat in Chennai. And the eastern bench, it is having its seat in Kolkata. So these are the five zones having their seat of hearing or place of sitting in these cities. Now, apart from this, when I talk about these zones, there are specific states which come under its jurisdiction. So that is also there, that all these five zones have got specific jurisdiction over the various, sorry, my screen is turning to be black. Just a minute. Just a second. Yes, I'm so sorry. My screen was turning to be dark because I had to put it on. I had to put it on charging mode. So I was just talking about that these zones have got territorial jurisdiction, and when I'm talking about the northern zone, under it the state of UP, Uttarakhand, Punjab, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, UT Jammu and Kashmir, and National Capital Territory of Delhi, and UT of Chandigarh. These are the areas which fall under the territorial jurisdiction of the Northern Zone. UP, Uttarakhand, Punjab, Haryana, Himachal, Jammu, Kashmir, Chandigarh, and Delhi. Now, under the Western Zone, the states that fall under the territorial jurisdiction of Western Zone, it is the Maharashtra, Gujarat, Goa, Union Territory of Daman and Diu, Dadar Nagar Haveli. So these are the areas which fall, or the states and UTs which fall under the jurisdiction of the Western Zone. Next is the Central Zone, with having its principal its place of sitting at Bhopal, and the Central Zone exercise its jurisdiction to Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Chhattisgarh. The southern zone, having its principal sitting at Chennai, has got jurisdiction over Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Union Territory of Pondicherry, and Lakshadweep. And the last is the Eastern Zone. Now, Eastern Zone having its principal sitting at Kolkata, it has got jurisdiction over West Bengal, Odisha, Bihar, Jharkhand, Seven Sisters states of Northern Eastern region, Sikkim, Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So these are the states to which uh, these has been divided into zones, and the place of sitting has been given, and this is how the structure of entity is there. Now, next important aspect is your jurisdiction. In regard to, this was territorial jurisdiction, but now I'm talking about that which all matters the NGT primarily adjudicates. Now, for this, we are to refer to the schedule that is there. Now, when I talk about the schedule that is there, Schedule 1 of the National Green Tribunal primarily defines this. Yes. Now, if you look on to this slide of mine, I've talked about the statutory jurisdiction to which the National Green Tribunal adjudicates. The first one is the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1974. Then the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Cess Act of 1977. The third is the Forest Conservation Act of 1980. Then is the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1981. Then it is the Environment Protection Act of 1986. And then it is the Public Liability Insurance Act of 1991. And the last is the Biological Diversity Act of 2002. So if you primarily look onto all these acts which are environment specific, to all these acts, the NGT adjudicates its jurisdiction and exercises its powers in resolving the disputes. So this is how the jurisdiction towards in regard to NGTs there. Now talking about the National Green Tribunal Practice and Procedure Rules of 2011. This is also an important set of rules which is important in the sense of smooth implementation and smooth conduct of the work of NGT. These elaborated rules are there. Apart from these rules, when we talk about the next important aspect is in regard to the compensations and relief. So, by virtue of this act, the tribunal looks on to providing quick remedy and also in terms of various compensation and reliefs that it gives. We'll now talk about a few important judgments where you'll see that from time to time how NGTs have contributed to better implementation of rights in regard to your environment. So now the first judgment that I would like to talk about is, just a second. I am just putting on that PowerPoint of judgments. Yes, let's talk about first judgment. This is the MC Mehta. I mean, somehow I'm not able to put up that PowerPoint that was made uh, in a different one. I was trying to, but it is not happening. So, MC Mehta versus Union of India. This came in the year, this order was passed in the year 2019. Now, the River Ganga cases, you could see that these, this has primarily been dealt by the Supreme Court of India in regard to various reliefs that were given and various initiations and putting up of affluent treatment plants, putting up of several other initiations like relocation of leather tanneries situated at the river Ganga, and then implementation of the action plan. We could see that there were several initiations, and then you could see that Supreme Court came very heavily on the state pollution control boards, right? So you could see that there are several judgments that have been filed by several judgments where the Supreme Court has given certain rulings. Now, this judgment, which came in the year 2019, primarily this was given by the tribunal, and it by this judgment or this order that came in the year 2019 in the month of March, it clearly came very heavily on the states of UP, Bihar, Jharkhand, and West Bengal, and stated that these states have not contributed much to the National Mission for Clean Ganga project, and it asked these states to formulate actions for phase 3 and 4, for phase 2 and 3 within a week, and it it came very heavily on these states, because when you talk about River Ganga, you could well appreciate that this is one of those rivers that run across the country and which is said to be the lifeline of our country. So when we primarily look on to that, why the states have been so negligent. So we could see that NGT came very heavily on these states, these 5 states through which Ganga majorly passes, and it said that the states should understand and should recognize their role in protection of the rivers as and also the role of the states, that they should also act vigilantly. Now, the next recent judgment that I am talking about, it is also important for you to note that uh, when we talk about construction that keep on now, when we talk about urbanization, we could see that there are many real estate agencies which run from time to time, and they keep on talk and they and concrete jungle keep on coming. So this is also one of the recent judgments. This is Rajendra Kumar Goyal versus Ministry of Environment and Forest and others, in which the Ansal built wells. Now, when I talk about Ansal built well, this is one of the big construction hubs that are instrumental in the Delhi NCR region. Now, here also in sector 57 of Gurgaon, there were uh, certain projects that were coming up. So when these projects were coming up, there was sheer violation of the rules in regard to the I mean maintenance of environment friendly issues. There was clear violation that was taking place, where we could find that there was no proper waste management, there was no installation of rain harvesting system, there was no proper maintenance of groundwater recharge system, there was no proper action that were being taken for illegal operation of DJ sets, and therefore, in this case, tribunal directed this real estate promoters to deposit a sum of 10 crores as interim compensation with the Central Pollution Control Board within a month, and an interest of 12% for any such delay in depositing the compensation. So you can just well imagine the kind of uh, fine that was as an interim composition compensation was being sought by tribunal, that went up to 10 crores, and which is quite an heavy amount, and which, yes, which clearly makes a mention that when we talk about entity, it always looks on to giving such judgments which creates a deterrent effect in the society. So this is how, when we look on to the various other judgments that we could find, the next judgment, this happened in the state of Goa. This is Betty versus, I'll just let you know the complete citation of the case. Now, in this case, Betty, she was not an Indian citizen. She filed and uh, application in the NGT in regard to indiscriminate construction that was going up in the region of Goa. So in this case, the preliminary objection that was taken by the defendant, they were saying that since Betty is not an Indian citizen, she don't have any right to file any judgment, to file any suit, or to file any complaint, or to make a complaint to the entity. But the entity said that even a non-citizen can file an application to the NGT, looking on to that the what all aspects have affected the environment, and entity do not bars any foreign citizen to file an application in the with the entity. Next important judgment that you can always quote and you can refer to is the Almitra H. Patel. Now, this is also an important judgment by the entity which talks about the disposal of the solid waste and what all initiation that we now see in the country in regard to segregation of waste and its disposal. It is by virtue of this judgment. Now, we had rules for solid waste management, but they were not being properly implemented. And when you look on to, or when we look on to the scenario that was prevailing, and which is prevailing now also, that there are heaps of garbage that is being dumped. uh, those who move or live near the vicinity of Delhi, you could see that when we go to Delhi via Karnal, that highway, we could see that the moment we enter Delhi, there are huge mountains of dumped garbage. So this is the kind of issue that we are facing now. So Almitra H. Patel is one of those judgments which gave several initiations. It's a long judgment which primarily focused on how solid waste can be managed properly. So this is also one of the important judgments. So this is in brief, I have told you about the working of NGT and how in recent years NGT have played a very important role Apart from this one very recent judgment, this is also of 2019. This is the case of Delhi, where loud music was being played by DJ systems, and which uh, caused several problems to the people living in the vicinity. So here also the Supreme Court, the NGT, very clearly came up and said that the Chief Secretary and the Commissioner of Police should come up with an action plan to uh, to come up with viable suggestions and initiations to control noise pollution in the area. So this was Hardeep Singh and others versus subjudicial magistrate. This is also a judgment that was given by the NGT, which came in the year 2019. One last judgment that I look forward to discuss with you. This was in regard to the groundwater, illegal drawal of the groundwater in the Gurgaon region. This is Harjinder Dhingra versus International Creation of Amusement Limited and others. Now, this amusement park was using or was illegally drawing the groundwater, which caused uh, issues of supply of water in the vicinity and scarcity of drinking water in the area. Now, Tribunal uh, checked on to this as well, and it uh, directed that the amusement park should use treated sewage water for its various water sports, and it fixed timelines for the Haryana state government to implement short term strategies within 3 months and long term strategies within 9 months to supply proper water supply to the people for drinking usage, and also to check or take immediate actions whenever there is illegal drawal of water. So these are few judgments that are recent in nature and few that were landmark in its sense, because the role of NGT we can always understand more clearly when we discuss the various the various interventions that are taken by the national criminal tribunals for the protection of the environment and also for controlling and abating the pollution, and also that yes, right to live in healthy environment is our fundamental rights, and we as vigilant citizens should always understand and should file for it. Right, over to Abhishek now.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was a really wonderful and a really valuable lecture. I'm sure we all have learned a lot about the NGT now. I would now like to call upon Sir Dr. Ajay Meet Singh to bring up the questions from the viewers, followed by a word of thanks.
Thank you, Abhishek, for the opportunity. So, Pooja ma'am, thanks a lot for delivering such an insightful lecture on the National Green Tribunal. So, you have
Thank you,
discussed
sir.
some of the important judgments as well. So, I hope everybody who has attended this lecture would have found it beneficial. So, ma'am, I just wish to discuss some points with you regarding the environmental problems which we are facing at present.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, like in Punjab, there's the problem of stubble burning,
Stubble
parali
burning,
jalana.
yes, yes, yes.
So, has the NGT, passed any judgment or order pertaining
Yes,
to stubble burning?
NGT has passed two very important judgments for control of stubble burning, and the mechanisms that now states are being popularizing, that they can take certain. I'm just not able to recall that judgment. I'll send it to you across. Then you can share with your students. So these were the one came last year only, where it talked about usage of mechanisms which can, in regard to how this disposal of the waste that is left over by after once a crop has been harvested, that could be done. And that is why there have been several states now that are giving on rent these machinery where the tilling and uh, this stubble could be uh, disposed of in a much better way, so that it is not burnt and it does not create an environmental issue that we faced last year and for the last 3-4 years we have been experiencing, when farmers of Punjab and Haryana, they used to burn this stubble, which caused a huge health hazard in the NCR region. And then we could see Delhi also shouting, and the farmers here at the local end. So to balance that, the NGT came up with 2-3 orders, one after the other, so that this issue could be resolved. Thank you, Ajamit sir. This certainly I had missed out. I had written in the thing that, but somehow I missed it. Yes. And any other query, sir?
Thank you, ma'am, for the answer. Ma'am, then I have one more question regarding the air quality of Delhi. Ma'am, as you know that despite the orders which have been passed by the NGT and the Supreme Court over the past few years, the air quality of Delhi, it is deteriorating day by day.
Yes.
So, whether in your opinion the registration of new diesel vehicles, it should be altogether banned in the NCT of Delhi? Like, what's your opinion on this particular point?
Now, in regard to the ban of diesel engines, now what mechanism that is being implemented nowadays in the new vehicles, it is not that harmful, right? When I talk about other old vehicles that were running with diesel, that caused much of harm to the environment. But what technology that has now come up, and I would not say that you are wrong in stating this. That is why in buses in Delhi, this is the judgment of MC Mehta versus Union of India, where CNG was asked by the Delhi to the Delhi government that they should get buses run by compressed natural gas, and that they should completely give up the diesel fleet of buses, which happened. It slowly happened in phases. The Delhi government implemented it, and now 100% of the buses that are being run at the local level by the Delhi government, they nearly 100%, they are running on CNG. So this is one of the initiation that was taken, but with diesel engine nowadays that are workable, they're not that polluting. But certainly I would say that the in my opinion, the concept of even odd, the initiation that was taken by the Delhi government of running the vehicles as even odd, these things can also bring up a change, because it's not that every time the government has to take an initiation. We as individuals, we as citizens of this country should also think and should also look on how we can use renewable source of energy, and we can use one small example, that is of single use plastic. I would like to just share with you that we as citizens, we should be condemning using the single use plastic. Now, here also I would throw open a question to your students as well, that how nowhere this single use plastic has been defined. Now, when we go out with a plastic polythene bag, this is said to be a single use plastic, but what about lays and other things that are being that are these are also single use plastic, but they are allowed, stating that this is packaging material. So it is a dual policy that I when I look at it, it's a dual policy that how MNCs, they can have, they can enjoy by stating that this is an packaging material, but a poor thelewala who's selling his vegetables, he cannot use this plastic, which is also single use. Similarly, Lay's is also single use, and other products, maybe whatever you find in the market, these are also single use plastic. This is also a dual policy, which I certainly feel that what is the clear definition to how would you define a single use plastic? Right, over to Ajimit, sir.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, yes, ma'am, you are very much right that the modern day diesel vehicles, particularly those which are BS6, Bharat State 6, they are
Yes,
not comparatively
full.
as polluting as were the older diesel engines. Now,
Hmm.
so far as the older diesel engines are concerned, so I think Delhi government had taken a decision a few years ago that the registration of the diesel vehicles, it will not be renewed after 15 years, like the
Yes,
RC of
yes,
a car.
that is very clear. That is very clear. The MV Act also clearly states for that.
Yes, ma'am. Like otherwise, after 15 years, the RC can be renewed. But so far as the diesel vehicles are concerned, the
No,
government has
no.
said that in Delhi we won't allow that after 15 years.
Even Chandigarh also do not allow it. Petrol they do, but I'm not very sure. But I think so that the UT Chandigarh also do not renews the diesel vehicles.
Right, ma'am. That's correct. So now, if anybody else has any question, you can put it forth. Sayed, Balpreet, Aina, if you have any question, you can ask. Okay, ma'am, I think that would be all. Thank you so much, ma'am, for delivering such a wonderful lecture at such a short notice. And I apologize that I
No,
I
no.
contacted you only yesterday for this particular lecture. So,
No, Dr.
ma'am,
Ajit, it is always good to be associated with you. And it was, even if it was at the ninth hour, I had a great time interacting with you all. Thank you so
thank
much.
you, ma'am. Thank you,
Thank you.
ma'am, for joining us on this platform. And we look forward and we hope to host you in LPU on a much bigger platform in the coming days.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
sir.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Abhishek.
you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
This was a
Sure.
really great session. This is Abhishek Grover, and this session was organized by Student Organization Democrats under the aegis of Division of Student Affairs, Lovely Professional University. Thank you for
Right.
watching.
Thank you. Thank you.